what happens when governments reframe state promise. The moment we asked Dr. Sudhir to speak on this, he has readily accepted our invitation, and I'm very thankful for him to accept our invitation. Well, we all know it's been, as I said earlier, it's been a year that the abrogation of Constitution Amendment of Article 370 and abrogation given a special status to Jammu and Kashmir while it was merging in Indian Union. And it was, as we all know, it was a constitutional promise after a lot of debate, discussion amongst various groups. It has been merged into Indian Union. The idea of India, we all know, India is a country with different cultures, different languages, different religions, but still the Indian Union has been formed on the after the independence from British rule. Later, but before, India suffered a lot, invasions of 1,000 years, foreign rule. We all know all these things. But today, when a state promise is reframed, how the people of that area will react to the government's actions, we have to see. And we all know India suffered a lot, all these 74 years of independent India. There have been a lot of agitations, war, 62 war, 65 war, lot of wars have been waged on India. And ultimately, we are still an Indian Union with a lot of change in the narrative of the public mind, and a political mind is also there. We have seen emergency. We have seen a lot of changes in this country. So now, how country is going to take a shape? What would be the reaction of the people of Jammu and Kashmir? How the future generations will react to the government's promise, which has been reframed. We have seen almost a war waged on India from the Khalistan side. A lot of regional parties have come all in these 74 years. Imbalances in political imbalance. A lot of issues have taken place in this country. So now, how Dr. Sudhir will deliver his course? The course will be, the speech, this will be for 40 minutes. And I request all of you to raise your hands if you have any questions to be answered after the speech is over. And now I ask Dr. Apathoda Srinivasulu to moderate and invite Dr. Sudhir to speak. Thank you.
Sir, thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ramu garu. Sir, vinapartunda?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ramu garu. Telangana Janavedika Zoom online meeting ku vichesnatvanti Vedika Sabhyulu Dr. Sudhir Kumar and Professor Sanjeev Reddy garu, Ramu garu and itara Vedika Sabhyulandariki స్వాగతం సుస్వాగతం అందరికీ నా సాయంకాల నమస్కారాలు. సంవత్సరం క్రితం మనం 370 ఆర్టికల్ మీద సమావేశం పెట్టినామనే అనుకుంటున్నా. నాకు గుర్తుండి ఆల్రెడీ 370 ఆర్టికల్ రద్దు మీద మనము వేదికలో చర్చించాం. ఇప్పటికీ సంవత్సర కాలం అయింది 370వ అధికరణను రద్దు చేసి. అట్లాగే నిన్ననే లక్కీలీగా 74వ స్వతంత్ర దినోత్సవాన్ని కూడా ఘనంగా తీసుకున్నటువంటి సందర్భం కూడా మనందరికీ తెలిసిందే. అయితే ముఖ్యంగా 370వ రాజ్యాంగ అధికరణ రద్దు సమాలోచన అనేటువంటి అంశాన్ని ఇవాళ మనం తీసుకున్నాం. ఎందుకంటే ఈ యొక్క ఆర్టికల్ ను రద్దు చేసేసి సంవత్సర కాలం అయింది. ఈ సంవత్సర కాలం లోపల జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్లో ఏ రకమైనటువంటి మార్పులు వచ్చాయి, నిజానికి ఇవాళ జమ్మూలో పౌరుల యొక్క పరిస్థితి ఏంటి, సామాజిక ఆర్థిక రాజకీయ పరిస్థితులు ఏ విధంగా ఉన్నాయి, మరి భారత ప్రభుత్వం ఆనాడు ఏవైతే చెప్పి 370వ అధికరణను రద్దు చేసిందో అవి దాని వల్ల జరిగినటువంటి లాభాలేంటి, నష్టాలేంటి, ఇవాళ జమ్మూలో ఉండేటువంటి పరిస్థితులు ఏ విధంగా ఉన్నాయి అనేటువంటి దాని మీద నిజానికి ఇవాళ డిస్కస్ చేయాలని చెప్పేసి మనం ఈ యొక్క ఆర్టికల్ను, ఈ యొక్క టాపిక్ ని ఎన్నుకున్నాం. సరే, 370 ఆర్టికల్లో ఏముంది అనేటువంటిది మీ అందరికీ తెలిసిందే, గతంలో మనం చర్చించాం. ఇది 370వ అధికరణ అనేటువంటిది ఒక ప్రత్యేక హోదాని కలిగినటువంటి ఆర్టికల్. దీనికి ప్రత్యేకమైనటువంటి హక్కులు ఉంటాయి. ఇక్కడ ఈ జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ లోపల భూములు గాని భవనాలు గాని ఇతరులు వచ్చేసి కట్టుకోవడానికి వీలు లేదు. అట్లాగే పీనల్ కోడ్ అనేటువంటిది సెపరేట్ గా ఉంటుంది. దాని యొక్క అసెంబ్లీ అనేటువంటిది 6 సంవత్సరాల కాలం పాటు, జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ అసెంబ్లీ అనేటువంటిది 6 సంవత్సరాలు ఉంటుంది. అట్లాగే జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ లో ఉండేటువంటి ప్రజల యొక్క డ్యూయల్ సిటిజన్షిప్ కూడా అక్కడ ఉంటుంది. ఇక్కడ సపరేట్ రాజ్యాంగం అనేటువంటిది కూడా జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ లో ఉండేటువంటి విషయం మనకు తెలుసు. అది 370 అధికరణ లోపల, ఆర్టికల్ లోపల ఉండేటువంటి అంశం. అయితే పోతూ పోతూ బ్రిటిష్ వారు మనకు స్వతంత్రం ఇచ్చుకుంటూ పోతూ చేసినటువంటి దుర్మార్గమైనటువంటి పని ఏంటంటే, మతాన్ని ఆధారంగా చేసుకొని మత ప్రాతిపదిక పైన ఈ దేశాన్ని 2 ముక్కలు చేసి పోతున్నటువంటి సందర్భం కూడా మనకు తెలుసు. అందులో ఒక భాగంగానే ఒకటి పాకిస్తాన్ గాను, ఇంకోటి భారతదేశం గాను రెండుగా విడగొట్టారు. అప్పుడు ఇస్లామిక్ దేశంగా పాకిస్తాను, ఇది హిందూ దేశంగా భారతదేశాన్నిగా విడగొట్టడం అనేటువంటిది నాడు ఈ యొక్క బ్రిటిష్ ప్రభుత్వం చేసింది. సరే, చేసినప్పటికీ ఈ 370వ ఆర్టికల్ అధికరణ లోపల కొన్ని ప్రత్యేకమైనటువంటి అధికారాలు, హోదాలు ఇచ్చారు. అవి గత కొన్ని సంవత్సరాలుగా, అంటే 73 సంవత్సరాలుగా వాళ్ళు అనుభవించినటువంటి హోదాను, హక్కులను, ఈ డ్యూయల్షిప్ ను, ఇవన్నిటిని వాళ్ళు అనుభవిస్తున్నటువంటి క్రమం లోపల రెండోసారి అధికారంలోకి వచ్చినటువంటి ఎన్డీఏ ప్రభుత్వం ఈ యొక్క 370వ అధికరణను రద్దు చేస్తామని చెప్పేసి గత సంవత్సర కాలం లోపల పార్లమెంట్ లో ప్రవేశపెట్టడం. హలో, వినబడుతుందా సార్? హలో, గత సంవత్సరం ప్రవేశపెట్టడం, దాంట్లో భాగంగానే పార్లమెంట్ లో ఆమోదం పొందడం, రాష్ట్రపతి యొక్క ఆమోదం పొందడం తర్వాత ఇప్పుడు సంవత్సర కాలం అయింది. దీని లోపల గతంలో విదేశీ వ్యవహారాలు, రక్షణ శాఖ మంత్రి మరియు ఆర్థిక సమాచార వ్యవహారాలకు సంబంధించిన మాత్రమే భారత ప్రభుత్వము అధికారం కలిగి ఉండేది. కానీ 370ని ఎప్పుడైతే రద్దు చేశామో అప్పటి నుండి ఈ దేశంలో ఈ యొక్క జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ అనేటువంటిది భారతదేశంలో ఒక అంతర్భాగంగా పూర్తి అధికారాన్ని భారత ప్రభుత్వం కిందికి తీసుకోవడం, అక్కడ ప్రత్యేకమైనటువంటి హక్కులు గాని అధికారాలు గాని లేకుండా భారత రాజ్యాంగానికి లోబడి పనిచేసే విధంగా ఈ యొక్క 370వ అధికరణాన్ని రద్దు చేయడం వల్ల ఇప్పుడు ఆ యొక్క జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ లోపల టెర్రరిజం అనేటువంటిది ఏమన్నా తగ్గిందా, మత కళాలు అనేటువంటివి ఏమైనా తగ్గిపోయినాయా, అదే విధంగా ప్రజల యొక్క జీవన పరిస్థితులు ఏమైనా మార్పు వచ్చేసిందా, సామాజికంగా గాని, ఆర్థికంగా గాని, రాజకీయంగా గాని జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ ప్రాంతంలో నివసిస్తున్నటువంటి ప్రజల యొక్క జీవన విధానాల్లో ఏమైనా మార్పులు వచ్చాయా, ప్రత్యేక ప్రతిపత్తి తీసేయడం వల్ల వాళ్ళ కలిగినటువంటి ప్రయోజనాలు ఏమున్నాయి, ఇప్పుడు కొత్తగా ఏమన్నా రిజర్వేషన్లు వాళ్లకు ఆ యొక్క ప్రాంతంలో ఉండేటువంటి ఎస్టీలకు గాని ఇతర మైనార్టీ, ఇతర బీసీ వర్గాలకు గాని ఏమైనా రిజర్వేషన్ సౌకర్యాలను కలిగిందా, ఇప్పుడు దాని వల్ల ఏమైనా ప్రయోజనాన్ని పొందేలా. గతంలో రిజర్వేషన్లు అనేటువంటివి జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ లో లేవు, కానీ 370వ అధికరణ తర్వాత, ఈ రద్దు తర్వాత ఇప్పుడు రిజర్వేషన్లు అనేటువంటివి భారతదేశంలో ఎస్టీలకు గాని బీసీలకు గాని ఇతర మైనార్టీ వర్గాలకు గాని ప్రత్యేకమైనటువంటి కొన్ని రిజర్వేషన్ సౌకర్యాలు కలిగి ఉన్నారు. ఈ ప్రాంతంలో ఈ 1 year ఈ సంవత్సర కాలం లోపల జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ లో ఉండేటువంటి ప్రజలకు ఈ హక్కులు ఏమైనా సాధించుకున్నారా, ఈ రిజర్వేషన్ ఫలాలు ఏమన్నా అందాయా అనేటువంటిది, అదే విధంగా టెర్రరిజం అనేటువంటిది అక్కడ ఏమన్నా తగ్గిపోయిందా, ఇప్పుడు శాంతియుతమైనటువంటి వాతావరణం జమ్మూలో ఏర్పడ్డదా అనేటువంటి దాని మీద మనం ఇవాళ డిస్కస్ చేయవలసినటువంటి అవసరం ఉంది. అందులో భాగంగానే మనం ఈ యొక్క ఆర్టికల్ 370 రద్దు గురించి ఇవాళ మనము సమాలోచన గురించి ఇవాళ పెట్టుకున్నాం. అందులో భాగంగానే డాక్టర్ సుధీర్ కుమార్ గారు, వారు అసిస్టెంట్ ప్రొఫెసర్, సెంటర్ ఫర్ పొలిటికల్ స్టడీస్, స్కూల్ ఆఫ్ సోషల్ సైన్సెస్, మీరు జేఎన్యూలో జవహర్లాల్ నెహ్రూ యూనివర్సిటీలో న్యూఢిల్లీలో పనిచేస్తున్నారు. వారు ఈ అంశం మీద మాట్లాడాల్సిందిగా నేను ఐ ఇన్వైట్ డాక్టర్ సుధీర్ గారు. సార్ ప్లీజ్ డాక్టర్, ఐ ఇన్వైట్ యూ డాక్టర్ సుధీర్.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Yes,
Thank you.
sir. Yes, sir. Please, please.
Thank you, Ramu, and thank you, Dr. Srinivasadu. It's a
you.
pleasure being with all of you. I remember meeting Ramu and Dr. Sanjeev in Warangal few months ago, and it was really a joy sitting with Ramu and other friends. I can see some of those friends present here. Professor Ram Reddy is also here, and I'm happy to be with all of you once again. And at that time, Ramu did discuss about Telangana Janvedika's continuous effort to promote debate and discussion culture. I really admire you, appreciate you for carrying forward this. Gradually, what we have seen is that the desire to carry forward the idea of a debate and discussion is fading. So, and in fact, a few months ago, we used to say that online platforms, social media platforms, were actually reducing the interpersonal form of dialogue and discussion. But in these tough times of COVID, when we are not able to have an interpersonal dialogue, I really congratulate Ramu for switching over to online mode, but still continuing with this great tradition. And thank you so much for having me here, Ramu. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I hope, is there anything for translation, Ramu? Or is everybody okay with English?
Everybody's okay. Everybody's okay. Don't bother.
Okay, okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. So, okay, let me come to the issue. When Ramu started his address, he mentioned one issue that India is a country with great diversity. We have different languages and we have different cultures. But friends, usually there is one more thing which I would say it's an oversight which we don't really talk about. And when Ramu said that, there is an effort to bring Gandhi, Ambedkar and Marx together, I think there is something which we need to bring in here, which we have really ignored, I would say, is that apart from different culture and languages, India is also a country with economic diversity. And this economic diversity primarily comes from the diversity which Indian agriculture holds. And it's not something which one can say that which was true few decades ago or a couple of centuries ago, during the British or before the British. Even till date, India continues to remain one of the most diverse economies in the world. And if one looks at India's economic profile, we are a country who are not actually, something which has been time and again nowadays has been emphasized upon, is a country with lots of talent, with software engineers and so on and so forth. India is also a country which produces largest amount of wheat, rice, dairy products, fruits, tea, sugar, and the list can go on and on. Now, usually when we talk about India's diversity, this is something which we overlook. And today, when I'm going to talk about the issue of scrapping the Article 370, I'm going to bring in this aspect, which has been ignored largely in the discussions on this issue. Before I start, friends, let me read exactly what was Article 370 before the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir was being governed with. Now, let me read it. This particular article existed in a section this is called Part 21 of the Indian Constitution, and the Part 21 primarily dealt with temporary, transitional, and special provisions. Ramu, is it possible for me to share the screen?
Yeah, sir, please. సార్
You have to enable me. You have to allow me.
I'll enable you. I'll enable you. 1 minute.
I can read it, but still I want everybody to see also that text
Yeah,
of the
okay.
Indian Constitution. So the section related to Article 370 basically comes in this part.
So then
And,
you can share it now.
Okay, can I share it? Okay.
Yeah.
Just a second. I'm just doing that. Can you see now?
Yeah.
Okay. Now you look at Article 369. I'm dropping that Article 69. But if you look at, it says temporary, transitional, and special provisions. So there were three kinds of provisions. One were the temporary in nature. Second one is the transitional, and the third one is special provisions. Now, if one looks at it carefully, there is a clear distinction between these three kinds of provisions. So the special provisions are not the temporary provisions. And similarly, the transitional provisions are not the special provisions. Now, when it says special provisions, what does it mean? Let me come straight away to Article 370. Now, if you see on the right side, it says temporary provisions with respect to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And if you look at Article 371 and the subsection here, there is an explanation. Now, let me read that. For the purpose of this article, the government of the state means the person for the time being recognized by the president as the Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir, acting on the advice of the Council of Ministers for the time being in office under the Maharaja's proclamation dated the 5th day of March 1948. Now, if you look at the explanations which are given in the footnote, it refers to March 1948 proclamation which government of India signed with the Maharaja, and then it later on it brings in the from the 17th day of November 1952, the said Article 370 shall be operative with the modification and so on and so forth. Now, friends, let me move forward. And this is something which concerns all of us. Next is special provision with respect to the states of Maharashtra and Gujarat. And let me move on. Special provision about Nagaland, and this is something which has to do with people of Telangana. That's why I'm just referring this. Assam, Manipur, and you see this 371D. Special provisions with respect to the state of Andhra Pradesh. And then if you keep on moving, you will find that there were all kinds of special provisions which were mentioned about different states. Now the question is that why these special provisions were brought in. It was basically about establishing a federal Indian state. Now, the Indian federal system did give extraordinary powers to the center, which the Constitution recognizes as the Union of India. But at the same time, it recognized something which Ramu discussed, the diversity of India. However, friends, the Indian Constitution was not only talking about the diversity of cultures or the languages. It was also talking about the diversity, which was actually the economic diversity. And primarily, that was the reason that different states were seen as different units, which had a different economic setup. In order to allow those states to continue with that kind of economic setup, basically the economy was a major factor along with culture and language. Now, when we talk about special provisions, we also need to understand that there is a separate schedule which the Indian constitution has with regard to the scheduled tribes areas and scheduled areas, where the states were allowed to have different kind of governance mechanism along with the primary mechanism of a state legislature and a governor. Now, the point I'm trying to highlight that when Indian constitution was being made, when the very idea of India was being given a shape during the constitution making process, different units, which were not only different cultural units, which were not only different political units, but they were also different economic units. Those units were brought in the new Indian state with certain promises with regard to the question of land and handling of the economy. And primarily that was the reason that when the new Indian state came into existence, the question of agriculture and land was given to the states. Land was actually primarily a state subject because it was realized that in different Indian states, there were different kind of land related governance mechanisms which were existing. Now, when we talk about the special status for Jammu and Kashmir, now I'm not going to discuss about what the people of Jammu and Kashmir think, how they have been reacting to this whole issue. What I would say is that how somebody who is sitting outside Jammu and Kashmir, how should we look at this entire effort by the government of India to do away with the constitution provision has to be seen. So it is not something which actually concerns only the people of Jammu and Kashmir. It is something which concerns people across the country. And uh, in this talk, this is what primarily I'm going to focus. Now, and the idea of special status. Now, usually people say that, the Jammu and Kashmir gave special powers to the state. It had its own constitution, it had its own flag, it had its own national symbol, and so on and so forth. When the government of India is dealing with the problem of Nagaland, it has already accepted some of the demands and it is ready to accommodate the demands which are coming from NSCN and many other forces which have been demanding a separate Nagaland state. Number one. And number two, if you look at the reactions which are coming from Arunachal Pradesh had already put forward their terms that the state of Arunachal Pradesh will not be divided in order to accommodate some of the demands of the state of Nagaland. Now the point is that is it only simply about Jammu and Kashmir and doing away with Article 370, or is it a bigger question which we need to be concerned about? Now, when I said that it has something to do with the question of land, basically, see, when the Indian Constitution came into existence, it's a very basic question, but I think eventually we have stopped talking about the very basics. So that's why I thought, I would share the provisions related to special provisions related to the state, and also let me bring in one more discussion here, that what exactly the Constitution means. And when I am referring to Indian state, what exactly it means. Now, Constitution is usually seen merely as a document of rules and regulations which governs the government. It is something more than that. And Constitution begins with a preamble. And, we all have read preamble sometimes. It starts with we the people. Now, when we say we the people, what exactly it indicates? It basically indicates a kind of social, a kind of political contract between the people of India to establish a new state with different kind of features. Now, the Constitution basically is a written affidavit, is a written document which actually codifies these terms and conditions that we all are coming together. And these are some of the basic terms and conditions for our being together as a nation, as a state. Now, Indian constitution further defines what does it mean by the Indian state. Now, usually in Indian political studies in common language, there is hardly any distinction made between Indian state and the government. Usually, whenever we talk about Indian state, it is equated with the government. Now, the Constitution of India categorically defines what is Indian state. And it says that Indian state is basically includes the government of the union, the government of the states, and the governments of the union territory. And interestingly, all other forms of local bodies, which includes panchayats and municipalities and so on and so forth. So when we say Indian state, it is a much bigger entity than simply saying the government. It is different layers of government which we are talking when we are talking about Indian state. Now, with the constitution being adopted, the new Indian state basically established a new union with newer units with new terms and conditions. And a federal state was a primary condition of signing this contract. Now, when we say it's a primary condition of signing this contract, it had basically three major features. Now, as the first one, which Ramu had already mentioned, that it actually talked about protection of cultures. We talked about protection of different languages. And in order to for the protection of these, it brought in the questions of justice, equality, fraternity, and other concerns of governance in the front. But at the same time, it realized that when we are establishing a federal state, we need to consider the diversities which are prevailing in diverse areas, which also includes economic diversity. Now, when we are talking about economic diversity, in 1950s, India was primarily an agrarian economy. So agriculture was a primary concern of the economy, and agriculture was closely associated with rural development, and agriculture was also closely associated with question of land. Now, if we look at the provisions related to trade and commerce, the constitution did give primacy to the Union of India, but when it divided the subjects, the primary responsibility was given to the states. And one major reason behind giving this responsibility to the state was to accept, acknowledge that diversity in dealing with the question of land and agrarian economy. Now, let me bring the question back to the contemporary times. What happened in the last 30 years? That this entire notion of agrarian development and so on and so forth was put on the back burner, and the question of development was started being related to two major fields. One was with the foreign direct investment, industrialization, and also the development of tourism in many states. So agrarian development took a back seat, and industrialization, a service sector based economy, became the primary engines of growth in New India. Now, the moment this shift takes place, the basic of a federal system, which was based upon the question of land and agrarian economy, also shifted. And the moment it shifted, it had a serious implication on all the economies which were primarily agrarian economies. Farmer suicide question in Punjab, suicide question in Telangana, suicide question in Vidarbha, or suicides in Karnataka's Bidar region and many other regions in India was primarily related to this kind of agrarian shift that was taking place. Because the primary concern of the states gradually became industrialization and inviting foreign direct investment, even at the cost of development of agricultural economy. Friends, you must be wondering that why I am talking about this whole scenario. Now let me come to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. In this entire picture, there are three categories of states which we need to consider, which try to protect their own kind of economy. The first such category of state was the states of Northeast India, because they were already included in the scheduled areas and they were allowed to deal with the land question as per their own laws. The second was the other hilly states of Himachal Pradesh, parts of Uttarakhand, and some other parts of states of Rajasthan, and so on and so forth. And finally, the state of Jammu and Kashmir. These three categories of the states had a different kind of economic status. One, most of these states were the hilly states. Secondly, they did not have a problem of drought. They did not have a problem of rain scarcity as it is there, let us say, in Telangana or parts of Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh. Their economic development was qualitatively different from what was prevailing in other parts of India. Now, you need to relate this question with the entire story of development which we have been hearing in India. Now, when Article 370 was being scrapped, the Indian Home Minister, in his speech in Parliament, apart from giving justification in the name of militancy, also gave the logic of development of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now one needs to understand, and there were many newspapers which covered this story, but not many media platforms actually raised this question. Jammu and Kashmir is actually not amongst the underdeveloped states of India. On many human development indices, the state of Jammu and Kashmir was actually doing far better than many other states of India. Of course, it was not amongst the top 4 or top 5 states. But at the same time, it was not actually the worst of states. In fact, if you look at the poverty ratio, Jammu and Kashmir is one of the best performing states in India. If you look at the literacy rate, if you look at the child sex ratio, Jammu and Kashmir is actually one of the best states in India. Now, what was actually driving this development of the state of Jammu and Kashmir? What was basically the economic status of Jammu and Kashmir which was driving its development? Basically, it was the agrarian economy of the state, which was a major force behind. Apart from the agrarian economy, tourism development was also another major area, and also the aid which was coming from the government of India was also responsible for the development of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, one wonders that when a state was developing so well on economic indicators, on the parameters of development, why it was also facing the problem of militancy at the same time. And what was the major reason then behind scrapping the Article 370? Now, I would like to bring in here two major questions. One is that it is very clear that economy, now if you look at the speeches which were given in the parliament to defend this particular legal change, constitutional change, the question of development was also equated that there is no foreign direct investment in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, when the question of foreign direct investment is being brought, basically the question of FDI was being discussed in context of tourism development. That was primarily the concern. And you must have heard, the moment the government declared dividing the state of Jammu and Kashmir into Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir, it immediately invited different investors to come and invest in the state, and the state of Maharashtra and many other companies said that we are interested in investing in tourism development. Now, here comes the question. That means that the primary driving force behind changing the status of Jammu and Kashmir was to allow the actors from outside to come and invest. Now, when that investment happens, it fundamentally alters the existing land related legal mechanisms of a state. Now, this is something which the other states of Northeast, the states, other hilly states of India have been contesting and demanding that their special status for protection of their natural resources must be promised, and the Indian state should continue with those protections and special provisions. Now, the fundamental question is that if that special provision for protection of natural resources of a state which was already performing better on economic indicators can be altered, can it not be done with the other states which were falling in that category? And if that happens, then what would be the implications? Now, here I would like to draw your attention to some of the implications which it may have. Some of my students have worked on the Kerala's development story. Especially, you must have heard, I mean, Kerala tourism is considered as a role model of Indian development, the tourism development. Now, if that becomes the case, the Ramu, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. Go ahead,
Okay,
please
okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Now, if you look at the state of Kerala, which is also one of the best performing state when it comes to the Human Development Index, the state of Kerala also recorded highest number of suicides few years ago. And these highest number of suicides were also recorded in the districts which have been seen as the role model of tourism development. And some of the recent research which have come up highlighting the problems of tourism development in Kerala also show that a major reason behind this was that the development of tourism as an industry also resulted into displacement of the local population, number one. And number two, the benefits did not really go to local people. The benefits really went to all those people who came from outside and started investing in the tourism development sector in Kerala. So the local farmers who were small landholders and who were small farmers, they gradually started working in the resorts or in the hotels and so on and so forth as security guards or working in the kitchen and so on and so forth. They lost their livelihood on the one hand, which was the land. And at the same time, they became dependent upon the people who came from outside and invested in the tourism sector. And since they had come from outside, their primary investment focus was also taking more benefits from tourism. And the ultimate outcome was a major fall in the agrarian sector of those particular districts. Vaitri and Kumblangi are some of the examples of those districts. Now, if we say that tourism development would be the role model after doing away with the special status of a state, and it is going to pave the way for development of the state, I wonder if it is going to move in the direction of Kerala development model of tourism. Number one. Number two, Jammu and Kashmir economy, especially the economy of the valley, is primarily dependent upon agriculture. Now there are also studies which say that it was because the state was self-reliant on agriculture, it was also able to sustain with the cross-border terrorism activities, and also it was able to survive despite long tenures of curfew and other kinds of problems in the valley. But at the same time, one must acknowledge that it was a state which was self-reliant when it comes to its own economic development. Not only that, Jammu and Kashmir also contributed to India's major agricultural exports, including dry fruits and apples and saffron, and there is a long list, including handicraft items and so on and so forth. Now, when a newer model of development comes and replaces that existing model of development, what kind of implications it is going to have for the people of that state in a longer run? That is a question which we need to ask. So, and if that land question can be redefined in the case of Jammu and Kashmir, friends, also let me tell you, just 2 days back, there has been a news that Sikkim has been declared as one of the organic states in India, which has been producing organic agricultural products. And it is one of the great success stories in the world. Similarly, other states of Northeast have also been moving towards, achieving an organic farming based economic structure. Now, if that starts happening, and a similar kind of environment for tourism development and so on and so forth also exists on those states. It is also the case with other states which have similar special provisions for protection of their land rights, protection of the different communities, including the scheduled tribes and the forest dwelling communities and so on and so forth. Now, once the union starts tempering with the special provisions related to one state in the name of development, I think it has actually started walking on a very different, difficult path. And that basically challenges the very fundamental promise which was made in the Constitution of India, that is establishing India as a federation. Now, what implications it is having in case of Jammu and Kashmir, how people are reacting to it and responding to it, we have seen different stories in the newspapers and so on and so forth. People have also been questioning how beneficial it has been for the state, if we look at the last 1 year. But I think there are serious concerns which are still lying ahead, and these are long-term implications of such a change. And I think Government of India needs to address some of these concerns and need to take into account these questions when such a major policy decision is being made. The promise of a federal state is dependent upon the union government, which is the main protector, guarantor of that federation, to abide by those provisions. Of course, the Constitution also gives major powers to the union to make changes in that federal structure. But we must remember that there are different federal states in the world. Some of the ideal examples which are taken are, let's say, United States and Australia, and there are a couple of more examples. But we must remember that these are very different countries with different contexts. India is a land full of diversities, not only cultural diversities, as I said, it is a land with full of economic diversities. And it is this diversity which Mahatma Gandhi was referring to when he was talking about Swadeshi, when he was talking about Swaraj. It is this kind of development which Ambedkar was referring to when he was talking about development of Indian economy. And that was the reason that Ambedkar was also not in favor of doing away with some of the principles necessary for establishing an economic equality in India. And economic equality was seen a primary base to achieve social equality. And Karl Marx's entire idea of talking about poverty, economic development, structure, and so on and so forth was also revolving around some of these concerns. But Gandhi and Ambedkar's intervention in both these fields are unique contributions, especially when it comes to the question of Indian circumstances. So when we are talking about this kind of a major constitutional change, we must keep this in mind, that it is not a short-term development perspective which the government is actually talking. it has serious long-term repercussions and implications on other parts of India as well. Now, in the current context, if one looks at the policy which is being adopted by the government of India, it has hardly come up with any alternative plans. It has hardly addressed some of these concerns. And that is the reason that, gradually there are cracks in government of India's talks with Nagas, and Arunachal Pradesh has also shown some kind of resistance to the ongoing talks with the Naga groups, who have been demanding separate and special provisions for the state of Nagaland. Special provisions should not be seen as something which is actually a real exception in a state. Special provisions are actually a strength when it comes to establishing a federal state, when it comes to establishing a more equal social and economic order. The moment a state like India, which is full of diversities, start looking at special provisions as something problematic, actually it is taking a very different path of economic development, which will also lead to a different path of social development. And in the current literature existing on federalism and so on and so forth, Indian story has been appreciated worldwide precisely because of its ability to accommodate different demands of different states, different leaders, and different regions through its constitutional provisions, and also through its political process, which was quite federal in nature. So I believe that there is a need to protect India's federal polity, its constitutional provisions, but at the same time, there is also a need to think of protecting India's federal economic structure, which is actually facing a major challenge with the emergence of the foreign direct investment led model of development as the grand model of development, and which is shown as a model which is going to resolve all the problems. I think we need to ponder over some of these questions, and I would be happy to listen to your comments and your questions. Rama, I think I would stop here.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Do anybody is having any questions, please raise your hand. I'll unmute you.
Sir, can I speak? Sir,
Yeah. Good.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you. డాక్టర్ సుధీర్ గారు 35 నిమిషాల సమయం పాటు 370వ రాజ్యాంగ అధికరణ రద్దు సమాలోచన అనేటువంటి అంశం మీద వారు విశ్లేషించడం జరిగింది. ముఖ్యంగా ఈ దేశంలో అంటే వారు అగ్రికల్చర్ ఎకానమీకి సంబంధించి మరియు వివిధ రాష్ట్రాల్లో ఉండేటువంటి ముఖ్యంగా జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్లో ఉండేటువంటి ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థకు మరియు అక్కడ ఉండేటువంటి అభివృద్ధికి సంబంధించి ముఖ్యంగా అగ్రికల్చర్ డెవలప్మెంట్ కానీ మరియు నాగాలాండ్ అరుణాచల్ ప్రదేశ్లోకి సంబంధించినటువంటి కొన్ని ప్రత్యేకమైనటువంటి అంశాల గురించి, కేరళ గురించి కానీ ఇతర రాష్ట్రాలకు సంబంధించినటువంటి విషయాలను మన ముందు పెడుతూ చాలా విషయాలు వారు లోతైనటువంటి విశ్లేషణ చేయడం జరిగింది. అయితే ప్రధానంగా ఇప్పుడు ఉండేటువంటి అంశాల గురించి వారు మాట్లాడకపోయినప్పటికీ చాలా విషయాలు క్లుప్తంగా మనకు చెప్పినటువంటి డాక్టర్ సుధీర్ గారికి తెలంగాణ జనవేదిక తరఫున ప్రత్యేకమైనటువంటి ధన్యవాదాలు సార్ మీకు. ఇప్పుడు మిత్రులు ఎవరైనా ప్రొఫెసర్ సంజీవ్ రెడ్డి గారు ప్రొఫెసర్ సంజీవ్ రెడ్డి గారు ఓకే. అండ్ ప్రొఫెసర్ సుధాకర్ గారు, ప్రొఫెసర్ కందకట్ల సుధాకర్ గారు.
Thank you very much. Am I audible? And
yeah sir, please.
Thank you very much. Actually, I was thinking of interacting with Dr. Sudhir Kumar ji. In fact, he was actually limited is subject to the extent of only economic aspect.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
basically, Dr. Sudhir Kumarji, I am a professor of law, and in recent times I am also engaged for teaching political sciences. So therefore, my perspective on the abrogation of the Article 370 is from the legal point of view, which I feel maybe an addition to the audience. Now, your exposition was more on economic aspect, but I would like to start
Yes.
upon the very foundations, the historical foundations basing on which Article 370 was drafted. And the situation to our audience requires attention as to what are the specific peculiar situation that was existing at the time when we became independent. And once the English people left, they left not only their principal presidencies and other places, but also around 650 principalities or princely states and all that. So bringing all these 650 and actually it comes to 638 or so was a little bit Herculean task with at least 2-3 states, more particularly such as Travancore, Hyderabad state, Junagadh, and Jammu and Kashmir. So there different techniques have been applied to encompass these 4 prominent, important, problem-creating states in the Indian fabric. So we have saw somehow there was not much difficulty in Travancore, and there was some difficulty with Hyderabad because of and only due to police action and all that. With a great exercise, it could able to without any alternative. Then ultimately it has to join. And in Junagadh, I must mention 2 aspects: Junagadh and Jammu and Kashmir. In Junagadh, the majority of people are Hindus, and the state is administered by a Muslim king. And Jammu and Kashmir, majority of Hindus and majority Muslim, and the king Maharaja Hari Singh happened to be Hindu. So here, the peculiarity that we could able to see when we throw some light in the history, Junagadh, as per an arrangement, there was a plebiscite that was exercised, and 99% almost the people of this country, that place, naturally, and because of the geographical conditions and all that, the Junagadh area is such that it is on 3 places covered is owned by the Indian territories, and only the sea is available. So there was no alternative, and the Hindus, they naturally happened to join a plebiscite. But the question was a very serious question was with Jammu and Kashmir, and Maharaja Hari Singh, on leaving of these English people and applying the tactic of giving option to the principalities. That is, they have got 3 options: either to join India, or to join Pakistan, or to be independent. These 3 are options for them. And so therefore, as usual, Hyderabad Nawab has opted for independency because he has got mint currency and everything, and established around 1,000 more kilometers of area, square kilometers of area. So naturally, the matter has even gone to the extent of United Nations as well. So also in case of Jammu and Kashmir, it was such that Maharaja Hari Singh was not prepared to join either India or Pakistan. But however, before the accession, the terms of accession, the agreement of accession is actually given a kind of note to Pakistan. But later, however, due to efforts of people like Patel and Jawaharlal Nehru, in the influence of Lord Mountbatten, ultimately, under some limited conditions of giving some right, they have accepted the Maharaja has signed an agreement of accession with the government of India that on certain conditions that only 4 major issues are left to the union government, that is defense, the transportation, the finance, and some other one. Only these 4 have been
Information.
so remaining other things are to be dealt with only by the state. So therefore, they have got earlier state their own constitution, and in 1954 they have got their own constitution again. So under the specific conditions, they have joined, and Article 370, as Professor told, is a transitionally temporary feature. But as a political science and law student, the very conditions on which, or the historical background which compelled Jammu and Kashmir to accede and join into succession are such that they may even be treated as a permanent features as well, subject to correction. And recently, with the agenda, Article 370 has been abrogated, and a question has actually arose as to whether with Article 370, Article 35A also has gone, because to my knowledge, Article 37, Article 35A, which gives also certain special provisions for recognizing the existing JK Constitution, is an offspring of Article 370. So therefore, it is not necessary to again subsequently abrogate Article 35. But because once Article 370 gone, Article 35 also gone. This is a kind of an academic discussion. But ultimately, what actually happened is that the terms of accession actually consists that apart from economic conditions, there are also certain other issues which are to be properly addressed. The owning of property, as the professor told, that the the valley is more attractive for both economic and tourism aspects. So therefore, maybe the government might have taken a decision that, of course, is subject to further discussion. But there are also some other aspects, like one cannot go and settle there. And relating to the women of Jammu and Kashmir, they are not supposed to marry any others. Suppose if they happen to marry others, then their right of this inheritance, along with not only her right but also the rights of all the children, are will be also going. And there are a lot of there are a lot of other conditions different, and all these conditions or identical conditions are also available in Article 371 A, B, C, D, E, F, and G also. I think the last one, in respect of state of Andhra Pradesh or Telangana, Article 371D provides special provisions, and of course Article 317H provides for I provides for E provides for establishment of Hyderabad University. So therefore, it is said that my point to discuss is that there are again existing certain special provisions are there in respect of many states, and such provisions were also there even as a matter of right, as a condition of accession to the government of India. So therefore, before actually the present government has taken a decision to abrogate the conditions, to bring in nutshell, what I would hold that, according to me, Article 370 is not an impediment, but a bridge between the India and Jammu and Kashmir. It has operated like a bridge between India and Kashmir. But actually, what is happening, that yesterday, in 15th of yesterday, it was only in Lal Chowk. Till last year, the Pakistani flags used to fly, and yesterday it was the the Indian flag as high. So therefore, this has to operate like a bridge between Indian people and Kashmir, and for which the people should be emotionally and psychologically integrated with the rest of the community. Unfortunately, the people of Jammu and Kashmir, preferably the Kashmir, are not even right now also emotionally and psychologically not prepared to integrate with the rest of the country. So therefore, we are experiencing all these difficulties. And so therefore, what I also feel that the people are feeling that there's a striking heart, the principle that the state of Jammu and Kashmir was acceded to India on certain conditions which have been taken away. So this, of course, appears to be a criticism, but however, on which I think it requires a little bit, my appeal to Ramu is that maybe after some time, a kind of deliberation of this kind may also be continued on this platform, so that some more information may also be percolated down to our audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sudhakar Garu. And I invite Professor Sanjay Reddy Garu. Professor Sanjay Reddy Garu. Sir, Sanjay Reddy sir. ప్రొఫెసర్ సంజీవ్ రెడ్డి గారు.
Yeah, you please unmute yourself, sir. Sir, Professor Garu. Yeah, yeah. Sir, please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah.
సార్ ప్లీజ్ సార్.
I am trying since long. I am not able to unmute myself. You have muted me there. Come on. Hi, Sudhir. Hello, Sudhir. Yeah. Excellent. Very incisive. A very new dimension you have given. This economic dimension.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
Very happy. My net was very bad, but still I could get the gist of what you are saying. Sometimes you are asking whether your voice is coming. Your voice is not coming here. But somehow I got that your comparison with the Kerala model and the whole division of powers, the federal structure, while arguing about the federal division of powers and the central government being a dominant player. This presentation was very good, Sudhir. But the point is, Sudhir, if you have argued that Jammu and Kashmir was and is, you said there's a list of exports it's doing. Okay, you have said that. So my question is, if a state which is agriculture-based economy, which is having an agriculture-based economy and which is having high exports, and also having as a bonus, they have also a tourist industry. How do you explain this kind of unrest in the valley leading to all this, developments? This is my question. I hope you understood what I am trying to argue. See, if you are trying to bring a model of Kerala model of development, Jammu and Kashmir model of development, and you have said in Kerala, the tourist industry has pauperized the landowning people. But in Jammu and Kashmir, it didn't happen because land cannot be owned by anybody else. So that's my question. Why this unrest? How do we, if there is economic development, it leads to social development, and social development should lead to other developments, enlightenment and all that. So could you connect this, Sudhir, please? Thank you, Sudhir. Thank you for accepting to be with Telangana Janavedika. Thank you, Sudhir. Nice seeing you after a long time.
But I can't see you. Your camera is still not on. I was thinking that probably I'll see your face.
No, there's a net problem, I believe.
Ramu, you want me to answer one by one, or?
Yeah. Please go ahead. You ask Professor. You answer Professor Sanjay.
Okay. So, in fact, Professor Sanjeev's question was actually, in a way, addressed by the previous
Professor
speaker,
Sudhakar.
Professor Sudhakar. Yes, sorry. In fact, so when he was talking about, the legal question and the political question, you are right that I did not touch upon these issues because I assumed that these are the questions which we have been hearing about the problem of Jammu and Kashmir. And, I assumed, I don't know if I was wrong, that it would be a kind of repetition of the same questions which are already there in public domain. Now, let me try to connect Professor Sudhakar's question with Professor Sanjeev Reddy's question. Sir, when you were talking about, the Hindu and Muslim question in Jammu and Kashmir and Junagadh, we must also remember that in case of Jammu and Kashmir, there was another peculiar situation that existed. And Maharaja Hari Singh and later on the other government of Jammu and Kashmir, they try to address that question. Let me bring that here. That in case of Jammu and Kashmir, the former state of Jammu and Kashmir, the land owning castes were largely the Hindus. Whereas the Muslims were either the small landowners or they were working on the lands which were owned by the Hindus. And you were also right that since it was being governed by a Hindu Maharaja Hari Singh. But I think one has to look at it beyond the category of religion when one makes such a distinction. Now, Jammu and Kashmir is also amongst one of those states with a great success story of land reforms. And what had happened in those land reforms is that the, the agricultural laborers and the working classes were actually given a piece of land, and this actually resulted into a different kind of socio-economic conditions emerging in Jammu and Kashmir, which also includes the unrest amongst those who were actually the land owning castes in the region. Now, that problem with the question of land, alteration with the question of land, was the first instance of resulting into an unrest. You are absolutely right that the problem are there with the accession and so on and so forth. But I think we also need to understand that in the 70 years of history of India, we have moved forward, we have moved beyond. And I don't know exactly whether there was a Pakistani flag on Lal Chowk or not, because in the middle of presence of so many paramilitary forces, if this was the case, I don't know how true it was. And I have never seen such a photograph where in the major chowk there is a Pakistani flag. But if that is the case, one also need to understand that probably there was a different kind of politics, there was a different kind of scenario which was existing. And one must also remember, I must highlight here, that in many state assemblies in India, in many other states, you will find a different emblem which is being used by the state governments. Many state governments also have their own flag. Many state governments also have their own anthem along with the national anthem of India. Now, all these are not something which was questioning the essence of Indian federalism. I would say they were strengthening Indian federalism. So there can be a Rajasthan flag, Gujarat flag, Maharashtra flag, Punjab flag. At the same time, there is an India flag. The moment we start making these binaries and look that, okay, there is an India flag and there has to be an India flag and there is something else which is challenging, I think we need to think about it. We need to address it differently. Of course, having a flag of any other nation state is problematic and one has to question. But if it happens in, let us say, in a remote area of Madhya Pradesh, in a jungle, I would understand that probably nobody noticed. But if it is happening in an area where there is a large number of paramilitary forces, I don't know how true it is. And then coming to, and that's where I think the legal and political aspect needs to be seen differently. Instead of simply looking at it from the perspective that, the people of Jammu and Kashmir do not feel integrated. I think this is not the complete real picture. This could be partly a picture. This is not a complete picture of the state. And why I can say this primarily also, because whatever central university teaching experience I have, and there are many colleagues from different central universities here, they would agree that there have been students from the state of Jammu and Kashmir from different areas who have been contributing to the academic fabric, to the academia in different capacities. So, and integration, I think there is one more problem when we talk about integration, that probably we could have taken the process of institution building much more seriously. When the government of India started opening central universities in different states of India, only in 1990s, late 1990s, I think this was a process which should have started much earlier. Secondly, there is a need to have different kind of institutions to bring people from different states on board. I'm not talking only about Jammu and Kashmir. I think this should have happened much before in many other states of India. I mean, the regions, if you look at India's regions, did not have a central university, a central school, or maybe many other kinds of institution. I don't want to discuss the list here. But the process of institution building should have been seen from a different perspective. So Jammu and Kashmir question is not actually only about what happened in 1950s. I think we need to look beyond. We need to go beyond. And the economic question actually when we talk about unrest in Jammu and Kashmir, it is an unrest which was happening in one part of Jammu and Kashmir. Rest of the state was still contributing to the development. And it is not only Jammu and Kashmir. Ramu mentioned it in the beginning of the talk. The similar kind of unrest happened in many other parts of India, including Punjab, which is one of the fastest growing states of India. It happened in many other states. Now, with all these states, Indian Union, they try to talk, they try to negotiate, they try to facilitate, and then brought them on board. I think we need a similar process when it comes to the state of Jammu and Kashmir as well. Instead of looking for radical changes and looking for major constitutional provisions doing away with.
But governments have been looking at it as a social law and order problem. It's not looking at a social and cultural problem, isn't it?
Sorry, Rama, can you repeat?
Yeah, governments have been looking at the problem as a law and order problem, but not as a social or a cultural problem.
Yes, you are absolutely right. In fact, government looked at it a law and order problem, which they assumed that which has emanated from the history and culture. But they did not look that it can be resolved by having better institutions, more effective institutions, and policy mechanisms. So I think it is a major failure of the governments when it comes to the process of institution building. Unfortunately, what has happened is that instead of contributing to a newer process of institution building, what we did is that we have done away with whatever we created in the last 70 years.
Correct.
So, in a way, it is being reversed now. The process is being reversed instead of looking forward. Please. Yeah. Ramu, I hope I answered.
Yeah. Professor Ramreddy, sir. Professor Ramreddy garu. Sir, will you please unmute?
Hello.
Yeah. Sir, namaste. Sir, we could hear you, sir. Please go ahead, sir. Hello? 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 Hello, sir. Sir, please unmute yourself, sir. Hello? Sir, unmute yourself, sir. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, sir. We could hear you, sir. We could hear you. Please go ahead, sir.
Hello.
Hello, sir. We are hearing you, sir. You are audible.
Hello.
Hello. Sir, inostund, sir. Meer maatladandi. Hello. Hello. I think something is wrong with the audio system there.
Can you SMS Ramu? SMS to Ramreddy.
No, he unmuted himself, sir.
Acha, by the way, Sudhir, if the central government negotiated with Pakistan, say Punjab, you said violence happened elsewhere too, and the central government negotiated with that. In Punjab, it has negotiated. How come it is not negotiated with Jammu and Kashmir? That's the point. See, you see, when the
Sir,
union government,
yeah, మాట్లాడండి సార్, రామరెడ్డి సార్.
yeah,
Hello.
Yeah. Sir, we could hear you, sir. Please go ahead, sir. Hello? You are audible, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, sir. Hello?
శ్రీనివాస్ ఒక మెసేజ్ పెట్టు సార్కి.
సార్ 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 రామరెడ్డి సార్ సార్ ప్లీజ్ లేదు సార్ కనబడుతుంది సార్ వస్తుంది సార్ వచ్చిండు సార్ కనెక్ట్ అయ్యండు
Unmute
సార్
yourself.
రామరెడ్డి సార్ సార్ ప్లీజ్ సార్
రామన్న మీది వాయిస్ వినబడుతుంది.
Hello.
సార్
సార్ మీ వాయిస్ వినబడుతుంది సార్ రామరెడ్డి సార్ ప్లీజ్ మీరు మాట్లాడండి సార్ ప్లీజ్ ప్లీజ్ సార్ ఓకే
Hello.
ఓకే సార్ ప్లీజ్ ప్లీజ్
Hello.
సార్ వినబడుతుంది సార్ మీ వాయిస్
వినబడుతుందండి?
మాట్లాడండి వినబడుతుంది సార్ వినబడుతుంది మీరు మాట్లాడండి ప్లీజ్
Yeah. Dr. Sudhir. Hello.
సార్ సార్ మరి మాట్లాడండి ప్లీజ్ ప్లీజ్ మీరు మాట్లాడండి
It's not.
ఉన్నాడు సార్.
Hello.
Hello, I can hear you, sir. Go ahead.
You can hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
hear you.
Yeah, go ahead, sir. He is listening to you. Hello? Hello, sir. Mallara. You please unmute yourself, sir. Hello, sir.
I think because of some problem with the setting of the phone, he is not able to.
Yeah, he can speak now. Yeah, please go ahead, sir.
Professor Reddy, please go on.
Hello, sir. Hello?
Meanwhile, Ramu,
Yeah.
can I just make?
Yeah, Kranti wants to ask you a question, please.
Yes, please go ahead.
Kranti? Kranti?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good evening, Professor Sudhir Garu. It was really nice listening to you.
Thank you.
Your insights from a different angle to the whole problem of the abrogation of Article 370. Thank you so much for that. So maybe, it's not a pure question from my end, but rather I have a different take with respect to some of the issues in that. Because, for example, because of this special provision, there were like thousands of Valmiki people, like Dalits, who were brought from the state of Punjab in the year 1957, the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and they were brought in as sweepers. And because of this special provision, they were not at all supposed to get any bank loans, or they didn't had any rights with respect to land, or they were not having the right to get any SC certificate,
Exit time
and obviously the benefits of the reservation. So they were confined to be the second-rate citizens of the state. So on a positive note, this kind of this taken by the government might actually give them some kind of a leeway to scale the hierarchy in terms of both economic status as well as the social status. So that's one positive light I see. Maybe that could be on a more pessimistic note, that could be the light or maybe the silver lining to the dark cloud, or vice versa, depending on the standpoint from which we see it. And also because of this kind of a special provisions given to the state, there were the political leaders, or there were few sections of the political class who were trying to exploit it for their own narrow political gains. Because if you take the case example of 1952, when Sheikh Abdullah has given citizenship to the Muslims coming from Xinjiang province of China, and in 1959, Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad, he gave citizenship to the Muslims who came from Tibet. So in the garb or behind the veil of these special provisions, which was actually facilitated for a smoother integration of Jammu and Kashmir into India, these people were exploiting it for their own political gains, and in the process increasing the gap or the cleavage between Jammu and Kashmir and India. Because I have my own personal example. When I had been to Kashmir, people were asking me, "Are you from India?" I was completely aghast listening to that. So maybe on a positive note, I see that maybe this process has been a radical step. As you had mentioned, there could have been the process could have been a much more smoother one, and giving it to shape and evolve in the plane of on the plane of time. So accepting that radical aspect of this step, I see that this has some positive aspects for us to take out of it.
Ramu, you want me to speak?
Yeah,
or?
yeah, yeah.
Yes, please go ahead. In fact, I want to listen to your take on this.
Yes. Now,
Maybe to plug the gaps.
couple of points I would like to highlight.
Yeah.
That I think we need to understand. It's not only Jammu and Kashmir where people from other states of India cannot buy land or they cannot own property. There are many states in India where people from outside cannot buy land and cannot permanently
Yes, in
settle
fact, we
down
have
by
some
buying
areas
land.
where we have to have inner line permit to go there. That's
Yeah,
specifically some states in Northeast India.
exactly.
Yes.
That's number one. Number two, you are absolutely right when you said that there is a problem with implementation of policy of reservation, and also second thing you said that different communities were granted citizenship. Now I would like to mention 2 points here. Number one, that reservation implementation is not a problem which is something peculiar to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. It is a problem which India has faced in all states across different sections and sectors. And, in academia, reservation policy was implemented as late as 1997. And even till date, there is a major backlog in most of the universities, which has not been filled up. In place of addressing that particular question, the government came up with an alternative plan of bringing a different category, which is a progressive step, but without giving any additional fund, without giving any additional positions, which actually takes away the rights of the existing reserved communities. Now, the question is that if the government is sincere about addressing the concerns of marginalized groups, then why there has to be two different standards by the same government? That is number one. And number two, when it comes to the question of giving citizenship rights, now, as a union government, I'm saying, it has to have a similar uniform policy. It cannot have a policy which in different contexts applies differently to different communities. In a federal structure, states were actually given that right to have a different kind of setup. For example, Hindus from Pakistan came and settled down in Jodhpur and Jaisalmer areas of Rajasthan. Bangladesh, people from Bangladesh, the Muslims as well as Hindus came and settled down in West Bengal, Assam, and in many other parts of the Northeast. So the question of granting citizenship in India in different states is a very complicated question. Now, when we see it something peculiar to the state of Jammu and Kashmir, my dear friends, I think we get into a process of generalization without looking at its nitty-gritties. Now, I think these questions has to be addressed, whatever government it is. But if it has to be addressed, then as Dr. Sanjeev Reddy also raised that question, I think it has to be negotiated and it has to be done through a political channel which does not contribute to the existing problems in any of the state, not only Jammu and Kashmir, in any of the state for that matter. Now, the same unrest, when we saw it in Gujarat, the government did negotiate. In case of Uttar Pradesh, the government did negotiate. I think when we say that people of Jammu Kashmir has to be integrated, then I think the first step is to negotiate, to speak to them, instead of carving them out as a separate category and telling that you are an outlier from other Indian states. And one question, one point I would like to raise here, Ramu, that people say that Jammu and Kashmir state had a different flag. I'm sorry, many states in India do have a separate emblem. They do have a separate flag and they do have a separate anthem. But that should not be seen as a problem. I think that is something beautiful which we have. I mean, I would like to hear an anthem in Telangana in Telugu. In Tamil Nadu in Tamil language. I would like to hear it in Malayalam along with Indian national anthem. So I think that diversity which Indian constitution was trying to bring in together, it is not only a legal question. It is something which is more than legal. And the moment we start looking at Article 370 and its abrogation as one-time solution of all these problems, I think we are getting into a very different track. It does away with all the institution building efforts which the government of India has been making since last 70 years. I would also like to say, including the previous government of Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, it initiated multiple reforms, including promoting tourism by establishing the Mata Vaishno Devi Shrine Board, which had a very different composition, which was a different kind of institution that was evolved. During those time, institution building mechanisms were taking place. I think we need to look at these complexities when we are talking about political concerns. And when I was talking about economic reasons, I was highlighting that what we have actually done is that we have put a full stop saying that, okay, political question is over. Jammu Kashmir's integration is completed. And now we have a different project, which is the economic development of state.
Corporatization.
I think that is something very dangerous, which is not only happening to Jammu and Kashmir. It will happen eventually to other states also.
Yeah, true, very true. James, you have your question, please. James.
Hi. Yeah.
So also,
Thank
just
you.
a moment. Sorry to intervene. Just a statement from my end. So we have given a very good point, valid point, Sudhir Garu, really nice of that. So at the same time, maybe I feel that in the process of allowing diversity and what you call acting as a lightning conductor for the principles of federalism, some elements in Jammu and Kashmir have used it for balkanization. So maybe, as you said, from the Indian government point of view or from the central government, they were not in a good position to stymie or prune down those elements in the state, because at some point in time they might have got benefited with those elements. So in the whole process of this, Jammu and Kashmir has become a hunting ground for all these elements. Like savannas are the hunting ground for the world, Jammu and Kashmir has become kind of a hunting ground for all these elements. Thank you so much.
James.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. I just would like to make a comment. I would thank you, Professor Sudhir, for giving a very unique and complex subject. So given a little paradigm shift to the whole issue, this aspect, economic aspect, we have not read so far. I have not read so far.
True, very
on Jammu Kashmir. So this is an entirely new, entirely new perspective, and thank you for giving this very complex subject, bringing this complex subject to us. And of course, also a very wonderful comment from Professor Sanjeev Reddy Garu also, which connected your presentation and also with what has been happening politically. And so I just wanted to thank you for presenting a great subject. Thank you, sir.
Swati, unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Yeah, go ahead, Swati, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Professor, for highlighting such an important topic to us and making us more aware of what's going on. So my question is in terms of environmentalism. Like Kashmir has a rich biodiversity, and with agrarian development, it's all very famous for its woodworks. So the hardwood trees that they get there and the work that is going on is fantastic. And still have been able to maintain that ecological balance despite utilization of wood industry and having those handcrafts. So will being 370 bring an disturbs an ecological niche of Kashmir? So that is my question. Will there be a major disturbance ecological issue of Kashmir with scraping of Article 370?
Yeah, thank you, madam, for bringing that. In fact, I should have mentioned that.
Sudhir, 1 minute. There's one more question. You please
Okay.
answer. Let him ask that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Ashok Kumar Garu.
Sir, namaste, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, thank you, sir, for throwing light on economic diversity, sir. Sir, you mentioned that Constitution was a contract between stakeholders. Sir, when you mentioned that it was a contract, Constitution was a contract, sir, do you think that there is any breach of a contract when government has done away with 370 article? And another question is that, a general question is that, ultimately, sir, people want to know whether abrogation of 370 article unites the people of Jammu and Kashmir people with India, or it alienates the people more. Just we want to know that, sir. Of course, you have given hints in that regard, but we want you to clarify somewhat, sir. Thank you, sir.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you, madam, for that excellent point. I should have mentioned that in my presentation. I missed that part. That yes, actually, that's what happened in Kerala, and the areas which have seen tourism development have also seen a massive environmental destruction taking place. And the fear is that it's apart from Jammu and Kashmir, most of the states which do have certain special provisions given in the Constitution of India, especially the hilly states, because hilly states have a different kind of ecology. And one major reason behind giving them special status was to preserve and protect that ecology along with their existing agrarian structures and setups. When this kind of system is fundamentally destroyed, it is going to have a long-term implication on the environment of the state, which, as you rightly said, so far has been trying to protect that and balance that ecological manage that ecological balance in the state. And apart from wood, as you rightly said, there are other forms of natural resources which the state is going to witness some kind of a major shift taking place in the near future. And as I was mentioning, I think apart from talking about the question of reservation and so on and so forth, should have come up with an alternative plan that how the ecology of the state would be preserved when the a new legal system is being put in place. And this I would also relate to the other point which was mentioned just now, that is this a breach of contract? I think yes, it is a breach of contract, because when this kind of a fundamental shift is being brought in, and with a very different kind of legal mechanism being followed, I think the Constitution loses its sanctity when it comes to that specific particular provision. And the breach of contract is very much a part of this. The second point which I would also like to mention here, that the question related to integration, whether it is integrating or not. I mean, I think the question is very simple, that I think the people of Jammu and Kashmir are not being integrated. Rather, it is the people of other part of India are being allowed to get integrated. So it is, it is something which is being seen from the other side now.
Yeah.
And one point which was mentioned earlier by Kranti, I believe, when he said that somebody said that, are you from India? I think one should not take it. We are still evolving as a nation. Even in my home, I see my mother, my uncle, and my aunt, sometimes wondering that from where these different kind of people come in. When people from Northeast, they see them, whether they are from Nepal, whether they are from Bhutan. People from Northeast India also feel in India that, they are being treated differently. And when we go to Northeast, people from North India are also being treated differently as, somebody who has come from outside. Now, these I think the moment we start reacting to this, how come one is reacting like this? That how this person has come from India. I think that's not the right way of looking at it. It's not that everybody who looks at it is a separate. It is a very different kind of evolution of Indian federal system which is still happening. People in India still do not know about the map of India. Still, we do not know about the states of India. We do not know about the diversity. We are still learning. I think we need to be a bit more patient when it comes to the process of learning. Any kind of hurry in that learning can be extremely dangerous. Ramu?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you. Acha, Srinivasan, sir.
Sir. Okay.
You ask what somebody wants any questions to be asked, or you want to ask somebody to speak?
ఇంకెవరైనా మాట్లాడే మిత్రులు ఎవరైనా ఉన్నారా? ప్లీజ్. ఇంకా ఎవరైనా మిత్రులు? ప్రవీణ్ సాగర్, ప్లీజ్. ప్రవీణ్ సాగర్.
Yeah, he's raised.
మాట్లాడండి. ప్రవీణ్ సాగర్, మీరు అన్మ్యూట్ చేశారు, మాట్లాడండి. అన్మ్యూట్ చేసుకొని మాట్లాడండి. Praveen Sagar.
Yeah, he is speaking. He's speaking.
Good evening to everyone. I would like to appreciate Ramanna for taking this bold topic for this today's discussion in our Telangana Janavedika. And also, I would like to say hi to all the members who have joined from Warangal as well as from Hyderabad, especially to Ramarao Anna, Tarvata Aksot. శ్రీనివాస్ గారు, తర్వాత హైదరాబాద్ ఇన్ఛార్జ్ మనోజ్ రెడ్డి గారు, క్రాంతి అండ్ మిగతా సభ్యులందరికీ. అండ్ ఐ వుడ్ లైక్ టు అప్రిషియేట్ సుధీర్ కుమార్ ఫర్ టేకింగ్ అండ్ హ్యావింగ్ ఎ వెరీ గుడ్ డిస్కషన్ ఓవర్ దిస్ bold topic on 370 article. So I mean, I don't have any debates on the topic which he has discussed, but I would like to say a few things about the Article 370. So BJP or Congress governments, we have so far from past 30 or 40 years. So most of the governments have tried to take this Jammu Kashmir issue into political agenda. I mean, to have a very good votes for them to take this issue up and utilize it for their political agenda. But at the end, this BJP has got the opportunity to resolve or to take up this Article 370 issue and say that Jammu Kashmir has been freed up from the constitutional aspects. Like the one of the brother has said that Travancore, Hyderabad, Jammu Kashmir, and other states from Rajasthan or Gujarat, have a good at that time when we have got independence in 1947. So these four, territories have not included fully into the Indian government. So they have some agreement with the Indian government, maybe either Gandhi or Nehru or somebody else, and they said that they will be part of India, but with their own provisions. But at the end of the day, to make it united India, so we need to have them to be merged into India. So we forcefully are with their help, Hyderabad, Travancore, and other parts of India have been able to make part of India. But whether it comes to Jammu Kashmir, we were not able to make it a state of India. Whenever we read, I am a law graduate, so whenever we read CRPC or IPCR evidence, at the end of the page, we will find that this particular article or this particular any IPC section doesn't belongs to Jammu Kashmir. So, which makes very uncomfortable when we read that.
Sagar, we lost you. Hello, Sagar. Hello, Sagar.
Praveen.
Okay. Swati has one more question, Sudhir. Yeah, Swati, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, you unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm unmuted, sir, now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, sir, what my question is that now Kashmir brings another variety of hardwoods in our country that is really not found in many of the other regions of India. So, like Gujarat has had to set up its own special imported timber conversion zone to meet with the demand of such kind of hardwood. So, does scraping of Article 370 benefits us in any way to meet this ecological demands? We definitely wood as one of the premier products in India and have been constantly using it. So, just like importing wood from the state of Kashmir with the uplifting of the Article 370 will benefit us.
Sorry, I did not understand, madam. Can you please repeat it?
Swati, he wants you to repeat the question. He did not understand.
Yeah, I can repeat it. It's like Kashmir, they gives us a fine walnut as a hardwood. Like mostly we have to depend on teak, sandalwood, mahogany, which takes long life cycle to grow up. Whereas some pine wood or the walnut trees, they are a sustainable hardwood material and they can be used instead of using teak. Now, Gujarat had to set up its own special imported timber conversion zone just to get walnut or other pine Roxburghite from other country. So when we uplift the Article 370, so it gives us a trade access and ease. So will there be a benefit in the ecological demands within the country?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the Gujarat example which you shared, but saying that we imported it from Jammu and Kashmir, I think it was the trade is happening, taking place within India from the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And the moment such kind of restrictions which are there with regard to, utilization of a particular commodity, be it food or many other commodities, it does benefit the business sector in the country. But at the same time, one should remember that it takes away the existing rights or the self-sustaining economic mechanisms of that particular region. And here I would also like to mention that in the last 3 months now, we have started talking about an Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant economy. Now, I think self-reliance, when we are talking, self-reliance is basically of the people who belong to a particular land and the kind of production which is happening there. Now, self-reliance and business interests. If we are talking about external business interest, I don't think that they can coexist. There is a fundamental problem when we are talking about a self-reliant economy, and at the same time, we are also thinking of promoting corporate interest or the business groups. So I think the government has a difficult choice to make today. When it is talking about self-reliant economy, it has to actually consider the demands of the existing communities. And you see what is happening today is that Kashmir is facing a different kind of unrest. That those communities which were actually demanding that Article 370 should be done away with, today they are feeling that they are the losers.
Yeah.
They primarily because within the existing system, they did have certain special provisions. Today all those provisions are gone. In fact, the people from Ladakh today are demanding that now their reservation provisions which were there for specifically for people from Ladakh, now today they don't exist because there is a different kind of reservation mechanism which has come from the new policy. So I think it is a very complex picture which has become far more complex with Corona pandemic becoming a reality. Now, since the government has already taken a different kind of track, I don't know how are they going to achieve that self-reliant and the tourism sector has collapsed across the world today. So what kind of investment possibilities are there in tourism sector. So on the one hand, agriculture is collapsing. On the other hand, tourism is not going to develop. And thirdly, there is a problem with the existing interest of the local communities. So I think a state which was actually doing better off before is actually going towards becoming a worse off economically and politically both. That's my worry.
Yeah. So the last two questions. One is from Praveen Sagar. He got disconnected in between. Yeah, Sagar, please go ahead.
So, sir, Raman, I don't have any question to Sudhir sir, but I can say one thing. I mean, it's like general my opinion. Dr. Sudhir sir, I feel like this. Article 370 is purely the decision which is taken by the BJP government is a political decision. Whether it is useful to the society Kashmir or the people who belongs to other parts of other states. Okay, so I would say that it's not a it's not pertaining to particular Jammu Kashmir issue. Like when I see in broader perspective, Jammu and Kashmir is a border to Pakistan and Afghanistan as well as China border. It has a boundary which has common three countries. So when we don't have a proper legal and political aspect to that particular state, it would be definitely a concerned issue to our country. But it has, by and large, when we say Indian government, which is there now, has handled it properly only. Technical aspect you have explained very beautifully. Along with that, we would say that Jammu Kashmir has to be a very good state, similar to other states. It has a very beautiful natural resources compared to other states. People out there are very good cultured people. We have a bilingual, everything, like Hindus and Muslims and other religious people. Now we feel that they are also part of our country. After abolishing or whatever we have happened to that Article 370. And we would like to appreciate the government today, I can say. Anyway, okay, so Sudhir sir, a very good discussion about this. Ramana, thank you for this very good topic.
Thank you, Sagar. Thank you. Is there anybody who wants to speak or ask any questions? One last question, I'll give you a chance, please. One last question. Anybody who wants to speak, please raise your hand. Hello?
Ramu, can I say one thing?
Sir, it is
there is a question?
Yeah.
Hi, sir.
Please go ahead, sir.
There is another general question, sir. Sir, there is another general question, sir. There is a debate in many circles, sir. Actually, India is whether it is federal state or unitary state.
Sorry.
Sir, many people say that. Sir, many people still say that India is still a unitary state, not federal state. Some argue, sir. Is it right, sir?
It is a union of states with a federal structure. I think that is right, Sudhir. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Okay, sir.
Manoj, you want to speak anything? Last minute. We are falling short of time. Please. Yeah.
Very good evening to all respected members. And మొదలు మా పెద్దలు పురుషోత్తమరావు గారికి నమస్కారాలు తెలుపుకుంటూ really very nice presentation by Sudhir Kumar garu, and of course 370 article was most daring step took by the Prime Minister Modi ji, and at the same time the whole no opposition was there. The whole thing was kept silent, and somewhere, in 2019 of August 5th, he took this agenda, and he was successful in doing that. The protests were been going on all over the country, here and there, but at the same time, he could have managed all that. And of course, the nature also supported him by Corona came to the effect, and the whole scenario was changed into the another aspect. So, of course, the retaliation was silent, but what I feel personally is some retaliation will be there from in some way, because when we go to the past in 2001 WTC attack in United States of America,
that is all hypothetical, Manoj.
Yeah, because it almost done after the World Trade Center was attacked. After 2-3 years of that, the retaliation was very huge from the most dominating country in the world. Yeah, of course, it's not that the former prime ministers, legendaries like Jawaharlal Nehru and Mrs. Gandhi, who was a daredevil from Asian country, the only lady woman, why she was silent in this issue and all that. In that situation, she was, that was the administering skills of them. That was wrong. Anyway, yeah. Go good. What I feel is,
thank you.
Really very beautiful presentation by Sudhir Kumar Garu. And I also thank Sanjeev Reddy Garu too, because he got connected today. And I thank Ramana really at this pandemic situation. He's taking up all very serious issues, and really it's a very wonderful evening. And I thank you all.
Thank you. Sudhir, please sum up now. Yeah, thank you, Sudhir.
Yes, I just wanted to, hypothetically one can say that this is what is going to happen or that is going to happen. I think it's premature to
true, very true,
say make any such comments, and one can actually say that one supports the step by the government and one may not like the issue. But I think Ramu, you would agree with me on one thing, that there is a kind of fear which is there around when it comes to talking on the question of Article 370 and the Kashmir question. And even I'm sure there must have been other people who would not have accepted because they don't want to talk about it. And when I also chose, I was also a bit scared, because you don't know in what light the whole talk is going to be seen. So I think that is something which one needs to be thinking about, that have we come to such a stage where we can't even talk about our own issues, concerns which are of our country and concerns which are of our own people. I think in a democratic setup, probably we need to be more vigilant about how are we handling the whole question of democracy and voice of people. And there cannot be any one solution or one, a panacea that which will resolve all the problems. No article can resolve, no document can resolve, and no institution can resolve. Democracy means working continuously and making efforts. In some efforts we might fail, some efforts we may be successful, and in some efforts maybe we are halfway through, we achieve something but we may not achieve fully. But at the same time, I think that the space for discussing issues should remain, and that needs to be protected irrespective of whatever government is there, whichever state is there. And I think the big question is that it's a litmus test of Indian Constitution, that whether as a document its sanctity is being maintained by the government, its sanctity. And I really admire former President of India's words, that it is whether it is the Constitution which has failed us or it is the people who have failed the Constitution. We always need to remind ourselves that it is we who make the Constitution. We are the one who protect it. Constitution as a document is actually nothing. It's the people of the country and the governments which we need to think about. So Ramu, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here, and it's a diverse crowd.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sudhir. So Srinivas sir, and thank you a lot for your cooperation. You have spoken you have given a new dimension to the Kashmir problem. I'm very happy. Srinivas sir. Hello. Hello? Srinivas sir.